From Hacker News Best, Justice Department files suit against Facebook for discriminating against U.S. workers. I have been talking about this one for quite a while, actually, going off about how the big tech prioritizes H1B visas, and as well, my engineering school prioritized foreign exchange students over the local population. Got kicked out when I had pretty much a 2.9 GPA, but I had failed a couple of classes, and my GPA was not quite as good, and they're like, replace me with foreign exchange students because their grades are really good, and they said I was white privilege, and there's too many white males, and we got to replace them with the younger, more diverse people. And so I wasn't good enough, so wasn't able to make any money off of that degree, and I had to shell out, of over $100,000 with interest for everything, and then I don't get to make any money because the people are too lib and too white privilege and Asian privilege that I'm not in their class of people, and so I don't get any sort of these benefits from the white privilege because I'm in the lower class of people, because as it turns out, most white people don't actually have access to this white privilege stuff that you're talking about. They actually, most of them are at the bottom of the social hierarchy because it's kind of a pyramid. And so it means that when you are dumping on the white males because of their quote unquote white privilege, you end up dumping a lot of times on some poor dude who can't really defend themselves. I mean, you might think that they have this unlimited white privilege from Kale's White Privilege Factory, but it's actually not true, actually. This comes from the Justice Department. It's entitled Justice Department Files Lawsuit Against Facebook for Discriminating Against U.S. Workers. Lawsuit alleges Facebook favors H1B visa workers and other temporary visa holders over U.S. workers. And I think I've already gone off on this particular subject twice now on this show. I think a lot of people would say I'm being racist against immigrants or something, because immigrants are a race of people or something, because they're like, oh, you're criticizing the big tech companies for hiring these H-1B visas. So that means because you're a white male, you have bad intentions because white people are the dominant class of people and they oppress the oppressed class of people. And since you're a male, that means you got that white privilege from Kale's White Privilege Factory that he only shares with the other white males. He won't give any to the minorities or the women. And so this makes him inherently bad because of his skin color and his gender. And then the people dumping on you typically end up being part of the more privileged class of people. So that more class, that because they're part of the privileged class of people, then it means that they are basically dumping on the people below them in the class ladder because they don't have to deal with the repercussions of attacking white privilege. No, the repercussions that are faced by white males, because it's not just it's not just like the women are sheltered. They're like, okay, the women are the oppressed class here because it's the patriarchy of these white males, privileged white males who put the glass ceiling over top the women. And so that's why we need the diversity tickets, because the guys like girls. They want more girls in the workplace so that they could possibly hook up with some of the girls or some of their friends. I think that's the only particular reason, and maybe the boss might save some money on the labor. I don't know, the owner of the business might make some extra money if the labor is cheaper. But these H-1B visa workers, okay, so you probably don't work in the engineering world. So these H1B visa workers, they bring them in. They're like highly skilled workers from like India or Vietnam or China, and they work these people to death pretty much. They're like damn near slaves. They don't, since they're from another country, they don't have family and friends here. The only so they're at work most of the times, and they're expected to reach a certain level of performance in order to maintain their job there, or else they'll be replaced with another H-1B visa. And the companies prefer these people because they don't live, or it's because they live at work. They don't have like friends and family, and they want to go have a life. They want you to hit they want you to hit deadlines and make you crunch. They want to extract the life out of you and then move on to the next corpse. So these H-1B visa people end up being insanely toxic overachievers. They're lovely people individually, but then they're forced in the workplace to be a toxic overachiever, to go way above and beyond, and the other people can't match that. And when they do try to match that, it causes a lot of harm to them. But these other people from other countries, they got this unique position, and they typically don't have kids, and they got a job where they got to go to another country. So they got their degree. A lot of times they came up through really hard work. Big ups to that. Respect to that. But then they got in this job at these big tech or big MSM companies, and then they got a privileged position, and then they work their butt off, and then they're viewed as more desirable than the white guys, because the white guys, they got all this white privilege, and because of that, it gives them some sort of quote-unquote advantage, which means that they have friends and family in the area, and they can't just like work all the time. So that means they can't compete with the immigrant labor, and so that means that they're not going to get hired. They're in the workplace. They're not as competitive to be able to move up the hierarchy in the workplace. And this causes a bias towards the international community, because our universities are just quick to hammer down on people for messing up with grades. Maybe they have to do that. It wouldn't exist otherwise. But our country had the war on drugs. Kids started getting strung out on dope, smoking weed, going to raves, and we became uncompetitive, became fat. We have addiction problems, been eating too many different pills, snorting too much cocaine. For some people, it's fentanyl. For other people, it's alcohol. They're drunks. And during this period of time, then China has not been doing that. They've been working really hard for cheaper, and what it allows them to do is corner the market on the labor supply, and then that gives a bias from these companies in the favor of the H-1B visas, because our people just aren't as competitive. And the only way that we could get on our feet is to be able to have a decent job and be in a community where everybody's focusing on the work at the company. But, these things, they don't really lend themselves well to wealthy, privileged, first world society, because people want to go out and they want to go to the bar. They want to eat fancy foods. They want to go on a vacation. They don't want to do slave labor. Typically ends up being poor people who had nothing else to do other than to go to school, learn, do good. And then you got the white privileged people whose parents taught them, their kids, and also Asian privilege. They taught their kids how to spend all their time doing this, focusing on the workplace, so they can get that good degree, get that those first milestones for the good job. Possibly they help them get the good job. And then everybody else, you're not in on this. This is the problem. You need to get special training. You got to be good at math. Most people testing in a math 70. And it ain't going to work. You ain't competitive. You're not hireable. Like it's like we got a cart and a horse problem. Like the people, it's not like impossible to retrain older people, but it's incredibly difficult. And it's like people are too frustrated or they're too stubborn. They don't want to. They only want to show the teacher that they're right, and then it turns out they're just an idiot. And they'll swear up and down they know everything, and then you like put them in a classroom with like some 13, 14-year-old kids, and they like don't know what the 13, 14-year-old kids are doing. They're like lost. They need to go back to math 70. And you're like, all right. Obviously, there's a huge education gap between parts of the communities. And in China, they were working in factories, and they worked all day long. And then eventually they got sick and tired of working all day long, and they figured out how the machines work. And then they came up. Now they're filthy, stinking rich because they learned how to manufacture things. And then we don't know how to do this. And now the Chinese Communist Party is trying to take over the world. And so they've got our big tech rigged in the favor of the immigrant labor, H1B visas, and the immigrants who own the companies, the multinational corporations and the globalists. These people have control because it's their families and their friends' business assets that are in control. They have networks of people, and then with the Chinese Nazi Party inside connections where they have state-sponsored. The state helps your company out. Like we don't have the U.S. government does not go around helping companies grow, but the Chinese Nazi Party, they do this massive intellectual property theft because they force us to make our goods in their country. Then to use their slave labor. Then they rip our products off after they learn how to make it, and they replace our products. They make it for better, for lower cost, and it's because they didn't have to put the effort into building the foundation of the structure, which we built. And then they just took everything, all our IP, and then they ran with it. And that's what China's doing right now. And these big tech companies are all heavily biased towards the international community. All with this H1B visa thing. What are they saying? Lawsuit alleges that Facebook refused to recruit, consider, or hire qualified and available U.S. workers for over 2,600 positions that that Facebook instead reserved for temporary visa holders. It's sponsored for permanent work authorization or green cards. In connection with permanent labor certification process or PERM, the position that were the subject of Facebook's alleged discrimination against U.S. workers, offered an average salary of approximately $156,000. According to the lawsuit, based on the department's nearly 2-year investigation, Facebook internally creating a hiring system which it denied qualified U.S. workers a fair opportunity to learn about and apply for jobs that Facebook instead sought to channel to temporary visa holders, and they want to sponsor for green cards. So this is another reason why they push this anti-racist propaganda. They don't want you to offend anybody on their team. So it's very evident if you question their dogma, you don't even have to be racist. You don't. If you question the dogma and as to why they why you can't even question this, just like bring it up. You're like, well, why can't you be racist? Why do I have to hate people who are racist or don't like immigrants? Like, why do I have to hate those people? Because you're a bad person. Because you're supporting white supremacy and racism. It's like, okay, and then what? How is this a problem to me or to my family? Like, it's not. Like, okay, so why is it a rule? Because it'll mess up their workflow. It's not functionally that somebody doesn't like them and then that's causing a problem for them because somebody doesn't like them. Because if somebody doesn't like you, it's like it doesn't physically affect you. Like, okay, there's millions of people. Some of them don't like you. Some of them do like you. All right, there's a net positive, net. Okay, so what would it be if like everybody liked each other? Is this going to make everything magically all better? No, it doesn't make everything all better if everybody magically likes you. But there's only one reason why you're not allowed to offend these people. It's because most of their customers are not white. That's the answer. Most of their customers are the rest of the people, the 4 in 5 people on this planet that aren't white. That's the customer. Like you're not the customer. You're probably the product to these people. So the reason for it is not because the world would be healthier if everybody's all of a sudden nice to each other. Because the reality is they live in gated communities. They have lots of money. Their kids go to private schools. They live by a different set of rules than you. You're not invited to the party. You don't make enough money. You're not in their class of people. So they're all preaching love and inclusion, diversity, and equity because they want you to like them. That's what it is. It's because there's 4 of them for every single white person. So that means you're the minority. You're the one that has to be nice to them because you're the small group of people. They have all the control on the supply chains. They're the higher up people in all the big MSM and big tech. They're pulling all the strings behind the curtains on the hate speech regulations with all the cisgender polyqueers and the transvestites and the other LGBTQITCB MAO BB people. They got up in the safe space doing their circle jerk, singing Kumbaya. And just to say one more offensive thing, Donald Trump's awesome. Oh, man, I triggered the fuck out of that one. Heteronormative behavior. White privilege. The quote, reading on in the article, quote, the Department of Justice lawsuit alleges that Facebook engaged in internal and widespread violations of the law by setting aside positions for temporary visa holders instead of considering interested and qualified U.S. workers, and, quote, said Assistant Journal Eric S. Dreban of the Civil Rights Division. Quote, this lawsuit follows nearly 2-year investigation into Facebook's practices and its reasonable cause determination by the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Our message to workers is clear. If companies deny employment opportunities by illegally preferring temporary visa holders, the Department of Justice will hold them accountable. Our message to all employers, including those of the technology sector, is clear. You cannot legally prefer to recruit, consider, or hire temporary visa holders over U.S. workers. And the U.S. universities are 100% guilty of this. I might have told this story already once in this video, but I got kicked out of engineering school because I failed some classes, and my GPA was kind of borderline. You took off the classes I failed, and then it would have been 2.9. Then you put on the classes that I failed, it's like 2.5. Just like murders it. And they didn't want to let me continue because I was a white male, and they wanted to replace me with foreign exchange students because they pay a lot more money, and the Chinese Nazi Party gave donations to the school. That's how they do it. They pay the school money, pay these exorbitant amounts of money so that you can train up the Chinese Nazi Party second-generation rich foreign exchange students, and then they take all our IP, and then they rip our companies off. They replicate our product, and they take over the market because they're not playing by our games. They have access to slave labor in Nazi China, where they say they're communists, but they have money. If you want to sell your product on the Chinese market, you need to give a bribe to the quote-unquote Communist Party boss. You got to pay him cash in a communist country where there's supposed to be no money. You have to give the dude a bribe in cash only. And he says he's communist. Obviously, the dude's not communist. Obviously, if you're using slave labor and you got a steep social hierarchy and you have a dictator who looks just like Winnie the Pooh, and you're trying to be the world's number one superpower, and you got millions of Uyghur and other Muslims in concentration re-education camps, obviously you're not communist. Because if you were communist, the Uyghur Muslims would be in control of their community, because the entire notion of communism is that the community is in control. That's the entire purpose of communism. It's like anarchy is the farthest possible left that you can possibly go, where nobody controls anybody. Theoretically, it'd be a perfect world, right? Right? That's why I don't dislike anarchists. Out of everybody on the far left, the anarchists are the only ones that I have any sort of respect for, even though I think you're kooky. I look at you like a libertarian. I admire, I admire, the ideatarian of this, the like pure, like make a perfect world, strict adherence to your dogma. But reality of the world is that other people will control you. So then, what's the other option? You got the community in control. That's the next step. If you can't have individuals in control, then you got to have the community in control, right? That's the next step beyond anarchy, going to the center. And but they when they're telling all their people, you're communist, there's no money, so we have to work all day because they're just been poor for so long, they're just used to working all day. They don't know anything else. And then you use them for slave labor, but then you have the Chinese Communist Party people help out their friends and family, and it ends up being a family of people along with a conglomerate of corrupt foreign assets that ends up taking control of the Chinese quote-unquote Communist Party, which is really National Socialist. They're fading out the word communism, and they're replacing it with socialism. That's their step. That's their transition before they just go full-blown Nazi, replace that sickle with a swastika. And we cannot compete with that. I mean, that's why they're doing so good in the technology market, because there's so much slave labor that is involved in this. I run a high-tech startup company. Does a AI note scanner, helps you make viral videos, promotional videos, and got my own network protocol, my own SDK, and so I know exactly how much slave labor it takes. It actually takes a lot of slave labor, and it's definitely kind of communism over here, right? Like pretty much one step above communism, man. I'm like, but that's how these people are able to one-up us, and we're falling behind. We are so far behind the rest of the world that it's actually embarrassing how far away we are, how far behind we are, because we built most of these technologies that they're abusing. They just like jacked our IP in this mass IP grab, and then their people are better at slave labor than us. So then it allows them to give an advantage, because our kids just they're not getting into the good schools because the other people are more competitive. And then it's a slippery slope where it's like each generation is get more into the rut of the low social hierarchies, and they're not having class mobility to move up to the top because they're always getting targeted for their white privilege. They're saying, "Oh no, you're one of the privileged white males that's got the glass ceiling over top the wham man, and you're one of those racist Republicans in those poor rural states that are holding down the minorities in the big Democrat-run shitholes." because you don't live in those cities, so you can't. When they attack that and they use that boogeyman or that straw man, you can't attack because you're not there. They just say, hey, look at this straw man. These are the opinions that this straw man has. Vote for me. I'm not the straw man. I'm the opposite of the straw man. That's what they're doing. It's a giant scheme in these big Democrat-run shitholes in order to convince you that it's not actually the people who are controlling the industries in the city that are keeping you held down in poverty, preventing you from getting into good schools because you're don't have access to the same educational opportunities as the upper class. No, it's the racist white man in the poor rural states holding you down. That's the reason why you're down in the ghetto up in the hood. That's why. It's because of my white privilege, and so you got to take it away from me. And in order to do that, what do you got to do? Replace me with an H1B visa because the blacks and the Latinos grades aren't good enough. But they say they're hiring diverse labor force, so the Latinos' grades are just a little bit better than the black people's grades. So they got to hire the Latinos because if they didn't, then they would be racist. Right? And if you don't believe me, I'm actually saying the truth here. I'm not trying to be hateful. This is just the GPAs of people. This was up into 2009. Same stats are holding. You got the lowest grades are at the bottom. Your black African Americans. The African immigrants not having the same problem. It's just the African Americans. Above them, you got Latinos. Well, then average GPA of African American 2009, 2.69. Average GPA of a Latino at that time, 2.84. Grades not good enough to get engineering school. You got to get 3.0. You have to get your grades up over 3.0. They kicked me out. My grade GPA was pretty much 2.9. I'm a white male. Why do you think they would let you in with less than a 3.0? They're not going to. You actually do need to be able to get through all of the work in a timely fashion, and your GPA is a indicator of whether or not you can get through that much work in a timely fashion. Not necessarily an indicator of how smart you are, but smart people are good at getting through work in a timely fashion. Here's the GPAs of white people. It's about 3.09 in 2009, and then the Asians were 3.26. So then let's look at the average incomes. So there's a little chart I made. You can see the average incomes of the different races. You can see the blacks had the least amount of money, Hispanics above them, white people above them, which is slightly over the average, and then Asians at the top. So you can see very clearly that the GPAs are identical to the income brackets. Sorry, I didn't say that right. The GPAs matched up to the income brackets of the races. And there's a lot of reasons for this. People are saying, oh, the minorities, the black people are getting discriminated against because you're taking into account their criminal records and that they mouth off to the teacher and get suspended more often, and that the kids in the hood are acting like know-it-alls, and they're disrespecting the people at the top because they say it's the white privileged male who is the racist, sexist, xenophobe. That's the reason why I'm not at the top of the ivory tower. So then you start to look at the demographics. Here's in 2016, who voted for Hillary Clinton. You can see most Democrats live in big cities. Also, too, where there's large amounts of minorities, where minorities are often the majority. And in these cities, we got big tech all up in here, big tech, right? So these cities, the people, the big tech, the Democrats who are in these cities, they have to maintain control. They can't just get elected once and then get kicked out of office whenever the Republicans do a way better job. They have to maintain control somehow. So how do they maintain control? Immigrant labor. They maintain control by bringing in lots of cheap immigrant labor into the big cities where these blue bars are. And they want to stay up at the top. So what do? You got to think they're at the top, and white people are already the minority here. So there's mostly non-white people. So there's big tech, and then they got to keep their power. They got to make sure that their family is able to maintain control over the business, over the to get them in through the inside connections, through friends and family, in the good jobs. So what do? They got to kick out people like me because I'm a direct threat to their ability to operate in the dark. They can just do this, and you just have no idea what they're doing. And like, oh yeah, we're hiring diverse people. Except for the black people's grades aren't good enough, so you guys don't get jobs. And the Latinos' grades aren't quite as good. But if we didn't hire them, they're the big new group of customers in town. People won't buy from us. They'll boycott us. So we have to hire the Latinos, or else people would call us racist. This is the scam. It's a scam. It's called the Democrat four-tier racial caste hierarchy. So what they did is they took the 5-tier racial caste hierarchy, which has the white man at the top, the white woman below the white man, the black man below that, the black woman below that, and then all of the other races below them in any order you want to dominate the caste hierarchy. It's called the 5-tier racial hierarchy. I didn't come up with it. It's just something people have been talking about. And so what these people did is they squashed it down into 4 tiers. So at the top, they got their class of people, the ivory tower liberal class. They maintain their place at the top by kicking out anyone they say is racist or is a conservative. Anybody who questions the dogma, they're out. You're not an ivory tower liberal. You ain't going to the top of the ivory tower, right? You're not in on the pedo crew that's banging the teenagers, because most of the people at the workplace are asexual, and then they probably haven't had sex since they were teenagers. And so then they start banging teenagers and hookers and doing all kinds of weird drugs up at the big tech companies, down when they're in the safe space doing the circle jerk with the cisgender polyqueers, right? So these people you question what they're doing in the safe space, dude. Or even if they're wearing protection with those circle jerks, bro, you're out. Bam, toxic masculinity. Oh, you dead named. You just misgendered. You're toxic masculinity man. Every single time they see you coming, they're gonna get everybody and then go running, right? You're on the blacklist. You ain't getting a job. Nah. You just called a trans woman a man. You can't do that. Because there's like 50 genders, dude. And if you don't think that there's 50 genders, then we fire you. And this means that they are allowed to maintain their spot at the top of the ivory tower by getting rid of you. That's how they do it. And how do they get? And then that's why they're hiring all these H1B visa people. That's why you can't criticize the immigrants, because the immigrants are their source of cheap labor. They own the tech companies. They own Quora. They own large percents of Facebook. They own large percents of Microsoft. They own large percents of most of the companies that are getting publicly traded, where they got a lot of Chinese people dumping money into the stock market to try to funnel those bribes to the corrupt Chinese quote-unquote Communist Party boss that's taking cash bribes only. Says he's a commie, while he's stuffing his pockets full of cash, using slave labor from the people he says you're communist. No, you don't work for money around here. We're communists. No, I just take the money and pocket it because I'm an insanely corrupt Chinese Nazi Party boss. Right. And then, so below these people, well, it says white feminist. It's supposed to say radical feminist. I'm messed up there. Those are the radical feminists. These are the people who they hire in the HR department, the people with like the woman studies degrees or the African American studies degrees, and they are only the only thing that they're qualified to do in the workplace is to fire white dudes to replace them with younger, more diverse people who will work for cheaper. Right, that's the only thing that do. So that's the closest they're gonna get up to the top of the ivory tower. Period. Right, and then below them you got hood Democrats. These are your low income, big city Democrats that live up in the hood. A lot of minorities around there, and they get the diversity ticket. This is why they're above the poor whites. The poor whites are at the bottom. The communists, street kids, the Antifa. Blaman. So, but they don't get diversity tickets, right? Because they don't get diversity tickets. Now they're at the bottom of the social hierarchy, and then the black people are above them. Hence why it's called the 4-tier Democrat racial caste hierarchy. It's so corrupt. It's so corrupt. You just have to see it. I started putting this together by looking at the demographics of who's voting and then how much money they made and what their GPA was. And then the striking pattern emerges of the people running the tech company are total scumbag pieces of shit. Right, yeah. And they keep saying, no, I'm the one that's the good person because I'm promoting diversity, inclusion, and equity. And it's like, what the hell good does diversity and inclusion and equity do to me and my family when I get fired because I'm a white male and I'm too old and I'm not young and diverse enough? I can't work for as cheap as them because I have a kid and I can't crunch. I can't do 16 hours a day at the workplace and get PTSD from overworking trying to hit a deadline. Right? It's like, what on earth good does this do me? It doesn't do me any good. In fact, it's actually detrimentally harmful. It's actually really, really, really harmful for me and my family because I get targeted from the workplace because I'm about, my grades are, in with the Latinos, right? Better than the black kids, but about where the Latinos or kids are at. Cause like, that's kind of where my class status is. Came from a single mom who had to work her way up and just didn't spend money. And we were just poor. I remember growing up, we couldn't get CD players for both me and my sister. Only one of us could get a CD player this year, and then I could only get the Super Nintendo. And then, it was just kind of, that's the battle. You got to grow up. Like, I never grew up with any of this white privilege stuff I'm talking about. I grew up with a poor single mom, man. I don't But this is the secret motivation that these people have. They're not actually preaching for diversity, inclusion, and equity. No, the average age of white people is 58, and they want younger, more diverse employees because they work for cheaper. It's a scam. They're scammers. That's why I don't like these people. That's why I can't stand these people. Everything about I think their class is parasitic. I think they're parasites. They really do. They're like they get in and then they start controlling, and then it's just their group of people. It's like they're extremely classist, and that's why they like feminism, dude. Feminism does one thing: makes the woman have more money than the men. People say, "Oh, women are underpaid." That ain't true. That ain't true. We can go over and look at the purchasing power of women, stats compiled by Walmart. And you can see women worldwide have 20 trillion in spending power. That they control almost 2/3 of the wealth in the U.S. We say 2/3 because it's going up to that. They're holding 60% of the college degrees coming out of college. They start 17% of startups, but they own 45% of businesses. Or hold on, no, they own 39% of businesses. 40. Never mind. Yeah, something like that. So obviously there's a disparity between the number of businesses that women start and the number of them that they own. And that's because the amount of money that you make on paper is not the same thing as the amount of money that you have. The two things are not even a lot of times correlated. You might be insanely wealthy and make $0 per year. It's because you're always running some scam. You're getting filthy, stinking rich. Women get inside access, especially if they're pretty. If they're young, they can have a baby. They can get a guy to work, put off having a kid till their 30s to try to have a baby with them so they could be the man. They do everything right. And then the women are young and pretty in college. Everybody wants to study with them because they're young, hot, awesome. Hey, nothing wrong with that. They're doing everything right. But the guys, though, they need money to pay for the date. Women don't need no money to pay for the date. So the guys got to do all these extra things because the guy's expected to pay. And it ends up causing the dudes to just get thrown under the rug. They don't get the help in college that they need in the study groups because they were too shy. I personally think we could change that one pretty quick. I've got ideas on how we can make this better. DM me if you want to work on making education better, working on some stuff for a startup for educational technologies to make better presentations quickly, also viral videos. And then yeah, so the guys aren't they are at a disadvantage because the women have more advantage. That's and people are like, "Oh, you're a white male, so that means you got all these advantages." No. Why are they saying that white males are privileged? Because they got money and they're like higher social status, but I don't have money and I'm low social status. So obviously the white privilege thing just doesn't work for me. And when you treat me like I'm white privilege, when really I'm actually weak and I am very easy to completely destroy with anybody who's got a decent sized social network who can just take a shit on me when I need help to get on my feet. You know, this story is repeating itself all around the country. People that got thrown under the bus in the education system. They're too shy to ask for help to get in the study groups, and they fall behind. They start doing drugs. They have to work in order because they can't just sleep with somebody, an older guy who's got their shit together, who owns a house in order to get through college. Have the guy pay off all their fines and all their debts from all their other boyfriends that they were had paying for all their stuff. Like the guys can't do that. They ain't got no tits. They can't have babies. All the older women can't have babies either. So the guys don't really care about them. It's got a bunch of guys with good jobs that aren't interested in the women anymore, their age. So they're all going towards the younger chicks. Of course, you're gonna have a bunch of guys paying for all the women's shit. And then you end up with this institutionalized feminism. Then we got women are getting the diversity tickets because they want the younger, more diverse labor so they can get a lower cost on it. They can get you to crunch, get you to do them 16-hour shifts, sleep on the cot at work. You could take a shower in the shower there at work. You don't need to go home. You just crunch with all the other slaves who got PTSD. Right, right. And then they want the women to put off having a baby till their 30s. And what does it do? They might have one kid. And then what if everybody in your family only had one kid? Your family shrinks in half in one generation. You're cut. Your family's gone. You're dead. You went the way of the dodo bird, bro. Like, your family just died off because you wanted to put off having a career until your 30s to go slave for Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, so you can keep up with these H1B visa guys. See, I was on a tangent. Wham. Oh, and then I hit you with the truth. Damn, I was spitting mad truth bombs. Yeah, because that's just the way it is. We live in a real world where men and women have different aging cycles. They have different requirements for social behavior. They have different points in time where they can make more and less money. And they're not the same. Not the same with black men, or people of different races of the same gender, because they're kind of interchangeable, right? Like, I could be banging my wife doggy style, and you could swap me out with a black dude that had about the same size dick, and she wouldn't notice. She'd be like, "Oh, honey, yeah, it's different. I like it." You know, she wouldn't even notice. But then replace me with a chick with a strap-on dildo, and she's going to be like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Right? Especially if you try to put it in her butt. You're like, But it's not the same with men and women. And then so we got this situation where people are just giving up having babies. Then our population drops off the face of the cliff, while at the same time, all the foreign tech companies are bringing all this foreign labor. And then next thing you know, the rest of the world just takes over tech industry, and we go down. And you got to wonder whether or not China's involved in this, because that's their strategy. That is their strategy. China is notorious for doing that. China is also alleged to have deep ties inside of Facebook. They're alleged to have pawned Facebook using Chinese Nazi Party assets that got high up in there, and they have business ties. They might not be from China, but they have friends who are business ties, and they get favors through soft power. And this is what the problem is when we don't make our schools work for us, when they have these steep GPA requirements, and the only people who are allowed to get inside of these programs are the people who got it all right when they were in high school. They didn't mess up and have like failures on their GPAs, no work gaps, no education gaps. And we're taking the money that people are paying for education, and then we're excluding our people from the education that we could use to compete with China, that we could use to prevent the globalists from taking over Facebook, taking over Twitter, taking over Quora, taking over Microsoft, taking over every port city in the world that has large traffic through Chinese companies. But instead, we would prefer to make our education systems only work for the benefit of the minority of the people. And then we'd end up stabbing ourselves in the back, because this allows our students to be thrown under the bus, swept under the rug, and be fed chemical weapons in the form of fentanyl that they're getting from illegal immigrants who aren't allowed to work in the U.S., so they sell illegal drugs, which is why 30% of federal drug trafficking charges are against illegal immigrants. And then we're not allowed to kick them out because that's racist against the immigrants, because the media tells us so. And then who controls the media and Wikipedia? China. Chinese communist, quote-unquote communist party companies, they have money. You cannot say that you're communist and have money. You cannot be a business that takes cash and say that you're a communist. You can't. You're a liar. That's not possible. You can't do that. But they'll tell you all day long that they are communist, while at the same time they're pulling a scheme in order to take over the world, to remove all of our people from these important jobs, replace them with their people and their good old boys network. And then they rig our elections, and we end up with China Joe Biden in control of the White House due to due to state legislators doing all kinds of unconstitutional things in the voting process, using sketchy machines that allow you to do weighted races where you can make some people's votes less than one. Like all Republicans could be 2/3 of a vote, and then the Democrats can be one vote, or they can be, and then you can just rig the system so that you have the numbers tally out right, and then you can run the cards through the machine multiple times. You're going to get the same results unless you audited the signatures. And then if you audit the signatures, then you would see, well, this is obviously like the numbers don't match up, and these signatures don't match up. But no, they won't do that, and it's probably because they're being paid off by China, by the same people who are trying to rig the workplace against our workers, U.S. workers, because we can't compete with these H1B visas because we're not a slave from another country who doesn't have any friends or family and who can stay at the workplace 16 hours a day and sleep on a cot, and they just don't have babies because they have pretty much sold themselves into indentured servitude. And they have to hit these performance metrics that are brutal, that our people can't hit, because if they don't, they'll be replaced with another H1B visa who can. That's fundamentally why this entire system is toxic. It's toxic. It's like radioactive toxic. Like, how long have I been sitting here going off about this shit? Okay, so I can't read this whole thing up here. If you want to read the thing, you can see it at github.com/Kale or /RSS commentary /Kale McCullough /issues /114, where you can find all of the links. And if you want to fact check anything that I said, you can reference it on that last article. That would be 7. And you could just reference that article just like that. So don't forget to smash that like button down there. And if you like this content, if you want to help us grow, share this video on social media. It's the best thing you can do. Also, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications when I go live. And until next time, sayonara. This live stream is not over, though. I've got more articles because so just stick around. I'm just going to get another article up.